Hello and welcome to the Frontington and Backwoods Railway, where I'm throwing the plan out of the window. With the points and signals in place and motorised, I looked at my to-do list, which included things like point rodding, fitting a stay alive to my Bachmann Collick goods locomotive, ballasting the track, wiring the building lighting to a permanent power source, and installing the back scenes. So, naturally, I started by making another hill. The entrance to the station is going to be over at this end of the layout, for which I imagine there being a small road leading into the goods yard. And to make it clear where that entrance road is, I wanted to raise up the level of the ground around it slightly, so that it's not all completely flat. I mean, there is a massive hill right there, but it's meant to be set in Devon, so you can't have too many hills. I used some offcuts of XPS foam to form some small hills, gluing the pieces down with PVA. The hill at the front comes up to the same level as the platform, which will allow me to create a smooth ramp for access, rather than having to build steps. Because old Mrs. Stubbs, who runs the ticket office, doesn't get on well with steps, not with her knees. The foam was then covered with a layer of paper soaked in watered-down PVA, similar to what I did on the main hillside behind. It doesn't need to support much weight, so I'm not going to worry about a plaster layer on top. And once dried, it was firm enough, so I gave it a coat of brown acrylic paint. I'm quite pleased with how it shapes the entrance now. To get the path up to the platform looking right, I used some air-dry clay, sculpting it into the shape I wanted. The ground surface of the goods yard was the next challenge. In real life, this would have been a mixture of leftover materials, including crushed stone, gravel, dirt, cinders and ash, all mixed together and worn down to create a rough but compacted surface. To recreate that effect, I'm using fine sandpit sand. Over here, I want the rails to almost completely disappear, so I'm raising up the level of the ground slightly with a layer of cardboard. I could just use lots of sand, but this makes it just a little easier to get the right height. While I'm working on this area, I also used some air-dry clay to create a concrete base in front of what will eventually be the cattle dock. Cattle aren't exactly house-trained, so there needs to be somewhere for the waste to drain to, and it's generally best if that doesn't go all over the sleepers. Then it's just a case of using the sand to cover the track, including the sleepers, up to the desired height. the bay platform gets a similar treatment, though not quite as buried, so you can still see the sleepers. Fixing it all down is much the same as ballasting, using a leftover spray bottle to mist on some water, and then a 50-50 mix of water and PVA glue to fix it all down. Of course, sand isn't anywhere near the right colour, so once the glue was properly dry, I had a play with painting it. I'm using a mix of acrylic paints here, using mostly black, a little white, and a dash of brown. It's not scientific, it's just meant to look dirty. I don't have much in the way of good reference material for what colour it should be, because photos from the 1930s were still in black and white, so I'm just guessing. I'm quite pleased with the effect though, so I went ahead and painted the rest too. At the moment it's just a generic dark grey sort of colour, but once I've figured out exactly where the scenery is going in the goods yard, I'll be able to go in and weather it in particular colours. For example, it'll probably need to be more muddy around the goods shed, and more black wherever the coal gets unloaded. Incidentally, I'm still figuring out where to put the coal. I want to include a small coal merchant to serve the local residents. I had originally thought I'd put it up here on the goods platform, but there's not a lot of space there. I also need to think about access to the cattle dock. I had imagined that sheep would be herded along that goods platform, through a gate at the end, and into the cattle dock. But that wouldn't work if there's a coal merchant in the way. And how would the cattle feel about that route anyway? Is there a risk of them falling off the edge and getting hurt? Do I need to consider an alternative route for cattle across the field behind, perhaps? Could I move the coal merchant down to ground level somewhere, perhaps in this corner behind the goods shed? If you've got any recommendations, do let me know in the comments. So, although it wasn't top of my to-do list, I made the goods yard. I mean, obviously there's still a lot of detail to add, but it's good to have the base surface in place. And with a little fine-tuning, the track looks good and buried, but I can still get rolling stock along it without any problems. And I can still clean it, which is useful. Well, that's all for this video. Do let me know what you'd recommend in terms of the position of a coal merchant and access to the cattle dock. In the meantime, I'll enjoy some shunting. If you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel, and maybe follow me on Facebook too. And join me next time, when I will absolutely be doing the next planned item on my to-do list. Probably.